So many years of catastrophe, more than 6 million refugees. It could be you and your family, forced from your home and your history.
We are the people, and this is our time. Stand up, sing out for Palestine.
Hello, and welcome to Palestine Today. Palestine Today is a show that is focused exclusively on the Palestinian perspective, the Palestinian point of view from Palestinians in Palestine and in the diaspora. I'm Kathleen Wells, your host, and my co-host is British journalist, campaign filmmaker Harry Fear, and we, Harry and I, aim to bring you the unfiltered truth. That's right. The unfiltered truth about the situation in Palestine. Nowhere else will you get that in the mainstream media or even the alternative media. So welcome, Harry.
It's great to be with you again this week and with good news, which is that today the Egyptian authorities opened the Rafah border crossing with Gaza for the first time in what feels like a very long time, but certainly in the order of days. And now a small number in comparison to normal, but certainly the most emergency cases have been able to get out to Egypt, less than hundreds, but in the order of, I think, 100, 200, or 300, and that the border will be open again, as it was temporarily open for 4 hours today, also again tomorrow, Sunday, and also on Monday. So that's not a glimmer of hope that there's going to be great news with Egypt opening the border as a normal border, but at least that there will be an alleviation of the crisis of imprisonment, which there has been afflicting Gaza for more than a week now. And that has come to be such a symbolic and devastating reality, which has, shed light on the whole besiegement of Gaza as just bizarre. And with Palestinians coping with using smuggling tunnels to try and circumvent the besiegement, you just see how fragile that reliance was on those smuggling tunnels underneath the border with Egypt, and how fragile the whole way of life in Gaza has become behind this insane policy that Egypt and Israel has maintained. And it's not just Israel, and it's not just, Israeli crony power in Egypt which has maintained this. It's much more complicated than that. And that goes to show and bring in the issue of, what are Arab countries doing to support their Arab Palestinian brothers and sisters? Not really very much.
That's a very important question. In fact, I had British journalist, British correspondent Alan Hart on my Wednesday program, and he has devoted his life, his time, his resources to the Palestinian cause for the last 40 years, and that was a question that he raised. He specifically said that the Arab regimes have not been supporting the Palestinian people. Now, the Arab people, maybe that's a different question. The Arab masses, that's a different question. But most definitely, the Arab regimes have not been supporting the Palestinian people. And I know when President Morsi was ousted most recently, the military, whether or not that was a military coup or not, is debatable. However, the military did close that border. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And again, there's a specific context, and there are both or multi-sides of the argument. But at the end of the day, it's a simple fact that the border got closed and it suffocated Gaza again. And from a general humanitarian or humanistic point of view, one just wonders how this can happen in broad daylight in the 21st century, when the situation in Egypt was meant to be getting better, not worse. It is just, I think it's a wake-up call for what's going on in the Middle East in general, that, actually things are sliding in many cases backwards rather than forwards.
Not moving forward. Well, we had Egyptians on the program when we talked about President Morsi being ousted from his seat. We had Egyptians on the program, and I know that Youssef did a video on Real Talk News. You can find it on YouTube, Real Talk News Youssef, about the Gaza border crossing and how that has been impacting adversely Gazans.
But we shouldn't digress because we have two very amazing guests for this week's show. Actually, Kathleen, there's a hidden story behind this week's two guests. The first is an Israeli and the second is a Palestinian. The first is Angela Godfrey-Goldstein, a committed, basically full-time peace activist who lives in West Jerusalem. And the second is Palestinian Abdelfattah Abusrour, who lives in Bethlehem in the Ida refugee camp. And for me, personally, both of these characters, these people, have been absolutely formulative in my becoming passionate about the Israel-Palestine situation. And when I first went to Palestine in January 2010, Angela and Abdelfattah were both, probably the two most important people in letting me see the reality of what was going on. So it's an interesting show in this bizarre respect.
Okay, so I know, let's play your interview with Angela, but before we do, I don't want to forget to give you a congratulations and a kudos, a high five to the fact that you gave an excellent talk, a TEDx talk in Copenhagen, and you talked about the subjective nature aspect of media and how that has been impacting people, how it's had a deleterious effect, this subjectiveness on getting the truth out. So I want to say congratulations. And when will that video be up? Because I know people want to see your talk. It was magnificent.
Well, thank you. I haven't seen it myself yet, so I can't judge it. But it'll be up within about 10 days, and we'll make sure to somehow link to it or something.
Okay, and I also want to mention that you're going to be a guest on Roseanne Live show tomorrow. We're going to talk about
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, we're going to talk about your TED Talk where you talked about the media specifically, and we'll talk about other things. But I would be remiss if I didn't say congratulations and kudos.
That's very sweet of you and very loyal as my co-host.
I'm a very loyal person. I know some people would never think that. But anyway, let's get straight to your pre-recorded interview with Henry.
So 11 hours ago, I spoke with Angela Godfrey-Goldstein, and she is, a treasure trove of information and detail about all of the specifics of Israeli occupation policy. And, she's one of these people who works so hard as an activist, she'll never get round to writing a book, but she ought to, because all of the details, insight, and stories she knows and has experienced is just incredible. So let's hit up with the interview. Angela Godfrey-Goldstein is an Israeli peace activist who is committed to working for a just solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. She is founder of the Jahalin Association, and we've not really talked much about the Bedouin issue here on Palestine Today before, so we're very happy to have her on the program today. Angela, thank you for joining us.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
Very briefly, could you just talk about what the Jahalin Association generally seeks to do?
The Jahalin Bedouin are a tribe, and there are about 4 or 5 Bedouin tribes in the occupied territories who were forced off their land inside Israel in 1951. So they're not 1948 refugees, which is the normal story. They are people who, over those years, 48 to 51, were in negotiations with the Israeli authorities and finally refused, after those negotiations broke down, to serve in the Israeli army. The Muhtar of that tribe said he didn't want to sign off his men into militarism, and for this they were then forced out. People were killed, herds confiscated, tents burnt down, and so forth. So they were forced into what was then the Jordanian-controlled West Bank. They have been scattered there ever since, but mostly they have been in the places where they now are for the past 60 years without moving around.
Wow.
They are refugees, most of them. They are herders. They are people of the desert. And my connection to them started because in the 90s I happened to go to the Sinai Desert, fell very much in love with it. Anybody who knows desert knows that this is very magic.
Truly.
Virgin territory that is untouched by human hand, except these days by some garbage, of course.
I've heard you talk, Angela, before about how what these tribes in a way offer is an insight into how one could actually live sustainably on these lands.
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons that all of this is so important, because what we are doing in so-called civilizing Bedouin is completely missing the point of their culture, which has so much to teach us. Bedouin are people of desert. They are people of extremes. They are the ones who know how to live in a situation that the world is going to have to get used to.
Yeah.
In days of global warming, we have a problem, and we will need to know how to solve it. These are the people that can help us. But if we're busy civilizing them, as I say, or sedentarizing them and forcibly displacing them so that they become non-sustainable, so that their traditions and their culture and their lifestyle completely disappear, it's not just their loss, it is ours. So from my perspective, I went to the Sinai Desert. I fell in love with desert. I became very disturbed to see how environmentally it was being degraded. In Sinai, in Egypt, it was because of tourism, whether that's water or garbage or all of the other problems, people going out in beach buggies and so forth and wrecking this very delicate ecosystem, putting too much water down there so that the corals are dying.
I'm sure people will be dying to hear you tell us, how did you end up as a peace activist?
Well, it comes back again to desert, because when you live in desert and really start to seek within yourself, and that's something that desert brings, because it cuts you off from so much, so that you have to face yourself, then on the one hand there's the environmentalism, that then gets linked to who you are in the world and what you want to do. You very fast get into human rights, land rights, Bedouin tradition, culture, other people's issues, and of course peace, because I was down there as an Israeli and I was there doing cleanup, saving Ras Mohammed Marine Park, that sort of thing. And therefore all of that came together, not in a very deliberate way, I would say. When I had to come back to Israel, then I really wanted to understand what the Oslo peace process was about. And I didn't get any good answers until I was invited to rebuild a demolished Palestinian home and have lunch with a Palestinian family. And this, because I'd been an activist, because I'd been down there in Sinai organizing divers, cleaning up garbage, cleaning Mount Sinai after the year 2000 millennium celebrations, which left it completely filthy. All of that came together so that I then started to understand that our policies, our Israeli policies of home demolitions, of land grab, of settlement expansion, of displacement of Palestinians, create the conditions in which terror thrives. And for somebody who seeks peace, that seems very wrong. Now, until then, I'd always thought that we were the good guys in the bad neighborhood.
That's really interesting, because in a way that's such a conventional position and understanding.
Yeah, most people, I think, still, certainly in Israel, want to think that we're the villa in the jungle, and they don't see what is happening around us as part and parcel of our own policies, that there's a chain reaction.
And could you give us an insight into the sense of otherization of Gaza? I know you yourself can go to the West Bank frequently, and you can see for yourself the situation with demolitions and all of this. But with Gaza, which is sort of in a way locked away, even for you yourself, what's the sense of, well, I don't really know what's going on behind that wall, and it's all a bit foreign, and it's all a bit of a threat, and etc.?
It's very difficult for the average Israeli to be able to talk about Gaza at all, because the nearest I've ever been was on a bus going from Tel Aviv to Cairo a few years ago in 1982, and then again in 1998, which went through Rafah, which was before Gaza was completely closed off under blockade and so forth. So I don't know Gaza. I know the West Bank very well. I am not romantic, I am not naive, nor am I in love with Hamas policies. And I certainly don't see myself as a traitor to Israel. On the contrary, I think that those who espouse war and militarism and do not seek peace are leading us over a cliff, that it's a suicidal mission that they're on. And some of that is fear, some of it is suspicion, some of it is simply they don't know what's on the other side of that wall that they've built. Maybe they don't want to know, but they are also being lied to.
The work that you do with the association?
With the Jahalin Association, first of all, if anybody has time, there's a 20-something minute film on our website. Which is amazing,
and people must watch it. What's it called? How can people find it?
Nowhere Left to Go. And you can watch it at YouTube or at our website, jahalin.org, Jahalin for Nelly.org. We have the intention to mobilize an advocacy response to these threats using external experts and Jahalin.
So the recent policies towards these villages and the demolitions, can you explain to us what's happened recently?
So in the last month, there have been 3 major demolitions. There have been many more. I mean, this year alone, there have already been 251 people displaced in East Jerusalem, which is the highest since 2009. 507 displaced until the end of August in Area C. Just recently, the municipality of East Jerusalem issued 1,500 new settlement unit building permits. So you've got a lot of settlements being built and developed, but you do have, on the 19th of August, an entire village was demolished, and it's the first time that an entire village was forced to leave.
I mean, it's just absolutely shocking. What's the media reaction to that?
Yeah, the agencies have reported it. I have to say that first one in Tel Adassa, next to Beit Hanina in East Jerusalem, was not massively reported. If you look at Jerusalem, it is surrounded by, down on the southwest and the east and the northwest, settlement blocks. And in those settlement blocks, you have 80% of all settlers. So Israel is trying very hard to develop that entire region so that Jerusalem, which is already closed off in the north and the south, will also be closed off in the east to Palestinians. So they won't have access at all from the West Bank into East Jerusalem. E1 is that tract of 12 square kilometers between East Jerusalem and Ma'ale Adumim settlement city, the third largest settlement city in the West Bank. And this Azaim Bedouin community that was demolished on the 11th of September is bang in the middle of E1. So there are many other Bedouin on or next to E1. We're worried about 3,000 people, and there's about 27,000 others in Area C, either facing displacement or have already been displaced. So Azaim, it was only 41 people, okay, but nevertheless it was a complete encampment. They were are the landowners, and they were very, very successful with an agroeconomy. So these were Bedouin who, although living incredibly simply because they're not allowed to build proper houses, nobody in Area C is almost at all. It's under military rule. All of Area C is, and that's 60% of the West Bank. So the people of Azaim, as I say, they are the landowners.
It's unbelievably shocking. So what's the United Nations said about this, or its spokespeople?
Well, they were not allowed to build even temporary tents, and everybody was really rather shocked, but nothing got said hugely for at least the next 5 days, when on the 16th of September, in a village called Mahul up in the northern Jordan Valley, that entire village was also demolished. 100 people displaced from that one. Most of the children were actually living in the next door village because their school was there, and there are many settlements and military bases in the area. So some of the statistics say 48, others say over 100. It was home to over 100. 2 days later, the Red Cross was not allowed, it was stopped by the army from bringing temporary tents and relief supplies. The next day, they and international aid agencies were refused. And therefore, on the Friday, there was another convoy which was escorted by diplomats, Australian, French, British, EU, Brazilian, Spanish, and so forth. And that got stopped too. And there was therefore then a major issue. A French diplomat was in the aid truck. And remember that this was about the third truck that the army had tried to take away and eventually did succeed in taking away. So these people had been living with no shelter for days.
This is incredible, because this is the video that many of our listeners may have heard about, or certainly those listening live or after the fact online. They will have seen this video with this French diplomat forcibly removed, and then we see her on the ground. But we never hear, Angela, about this context.
Yeah, I mean, they are trying to divert attention away from their responsibilities. An occupying power has responsibilities under international law. We are signatories of the Fourth Geneva Convention, Article 49, which considers forced displacement, which this is, a grave breach. So Israel, the Israeli spokespersons, are working very hard not to deal with any of that, with none of the criticisms, with none of their duties, but to focus on the diplomat who I believe has now been recalled back to Paris. The statement here of the spokesperson from UNRWA, which is the United Nations Refugees and Works Agency, who says there is ongoing pressure being applied by the Israeli authorities to Bedouin communities in the Jerusalem periphery, both in and around the area earmarked for the E1 settlement construction project. As we know, these communities are targeted for transfer to locations outside the so-called Ma'ale Adumim bubble. Administrative demolition has a severe psychological and economic impact on Palestine refugees throughout Area C, and in the case of the periphery, where communities face the additional threat of full transfer, stress levels are now high.
Do Israelis get to see the human impact of these policies?
No, I don't think it's coming through on Israeli television very much at all, because, as I say, even if you get a little bit on Channel 10, which is a little bit more independent, Channel 2 only focused on the violence that they said was coming from that diplomat, which was very distorted, very twisted, and they weren't being told that we have duties as an occupying power at all. Peace cannot come with these sort of policies. I do not see this current government as being serious about peace, and that means that if you've got American listeners at the moment listening, if the State Department, if John Kerry, the Secretary of State, doesn't understand how destructive our policies are to the peace process, because failure to prevent Israel from taking land from the Palestinians and all this ongoing settlement expansion is destroying his credibility and American credibility in the region, this makes one wonder where America is going.
Just go back again to what the UN has been saying, and then also what's the message that the Jahalin Association is pumping out at the moment about all of these shocking stories?
Professor Raquel Rolnick, who's the UN Special Rapporteur for Adequate Housing, she was here last year, and I'm going to read you 2 paragraphs from her report issued this year. She said, while the issue is critical throughout the West Bank, the mission notes the high number of demolitions, demolition orders, forced evictions and relocation plans in zones identified for the consolidation of settlements, including around Bethlehem and the E1 project, aimed at creating an urban continuum between East Jerusalem and Ma'ale Adumim. In this area, the Jahalin Bedouin community in Khan al-Ahmar, which in the past has experienced several demolitions, lives under the threat of forcible displacement. Relocation plans are currently under discussion, including to a location near a landfill, which is a garbage dump, where in 1996 Bedouin had already been relocated to in connection with earlier settlement expansions. And Harry, I just want to mention there that, of course, settlement expansion goes hand in hand with demolitions and displacement. And I think that's not always clearly understood by people. They think settlements is something in its own vacuum. Even if we stop the demolitions, even if we stop the relocation plans and the massive ethnic transfer that is being mooted by Israel or planned for, the current situation is absolutely untenable, and that's something that we're advocating for. These people should have schools. We've got 18 schools in Area C, either with demolition orders or stop work orders on them. People are not able to get an education, a basic human right.
It's unbelievable. And in some cases, these areas are being taken for sometimes settling, making settlements, and other times for people practicing firing their weapons. Yeah.
Oh, and that can be a temporary thing. What has happened over the years, generally speaking, is that the army will declare an area a closed military zone, and as I say, much of Area C is that, but many of those places then a year or two later get handed over to become settlements. And don't forget that every single government ministry is working with and for the settlers. So even though they may be on stolen land that is recognized as being privately owned Palestinian land, every single government ministry, as documented in the Sasson report by a lawyer in the Ministry of Justice, is complicit in that.
Our next guest on today's episode is Abdelfattah Abusrour, who lives in the Aida refugee camp. Now, could you just imagine what you would have to physically go through to go and see him in his camp, so to speak?
Yeah. I've been in Aida refugee camp before they built the wall with journalists to show them the route of the wall that was being planned. For me to get there now, it's another world. I would have to get on a bus, a Palestinian bus, which most Israelis would never do because they would be sure that somebody will knife them. I lived in Egypt for 4 years, and therefore I speak some basic Arabic, and I know when I get on a bus to say Salam Alaikum, and I speak in Arabic asking for the ticket and so forth. So I'm far less worried than the average Israeli.
Sure.
And there is, Harry, let's not get past the fact that some of Israeli fear is being fear-mongered to keep people thinking this way, but some of it comes with very good reasons in the past. I was telling somebody the other day about the Ramallah lynching, for example, that traumatized Israel, and he never knew about this, so he didn't understand. Why would Israelis think it's dangerous to go there? It's just normal. No, it's not. But nevertheless, for me, I would get on a bus, I would go for about half an hour all the way around the back, because wherever the wall is, on the whole, you can get through it by going around the back, and I therefore don't accept it as a security measure at all. I see it as purely political. It's mostly a land grab. It's mostly to isolate the Palestinians into ever smaller cantons, ghettos, Bantustans, whatever word you want to choose, and force them out, basically. So I would go to Aida. It would take me probably, the other day I went to Beit Zahor. It took me an hour and a half, a journey that prior to 10 years ago would take about 15, 20 minutes.
Do you get harassed by security personnel at Israel's airport and, trying to get to the West Bank? Do you get harassed by soldiers?
It depends how you define harassment, because we are not free. And I sometimes like to hope that our authorities, the more intelligent ones, although military intelligence is a bit of an oxymoron, that the more intelligent ones understand the need. If you watch the film The Gatekeepers...
I was just going to say, yeah.
They themselves are talking about how we need peace and how the government is absolutely derelict. It is not making peace, it's making war. It's making the matter worse. And that they can only keep the violence, terror, etc. down for as long as they can. So I hope they understand that the work of people like me, and I'm not the only one, is geared to solving the problem so that we can all live normal lives. I'm not anti-Israeli, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm not a self-hating Jew or any of those things. I actually believe that we all deserve a decent life, future, joint country or two states, whatever can be best worked on. Those with intelligence should see that those of us trying to work towards peace are actually the people that should be supported, and not trying to undermine the state. Or, of course, there's a whole right wing that sees us as the enemy and that sees us as traitors and will spit on us at demonstrations and so on and so forth.
Well, thank you again for coming on the program, and it was absolutely fascinating and absolutely tragic and absolutely mind-blowing. Thank you so much, Angela.
Thanks, dear.
We were just listening to Harry's pre-recorded interview, and it was fantastic, actually. He conducted that interview with Angela, I'm sorry, I don't have her last name. Harry, are you on the line?
Angela, I'm back. Angela Godfrey-Goldstein. It was a good interview, and it was full of information, and it makes you realize the kind of, when we were doing the interview 11 hours ago, it made me realize the great monolith of policies and details that go behind inflicting an occupation's policies with, from the legal system that allows demolitions and etc. Mind-blowing stuff.
Okay, so we're going to take a break. We just listened to Harry's interviews with Israeli Angela Godfrey-Goldstein, and when we come back from the break, we'll have Abdelfattah, am I pronounced Palestinian Abdelfattah on...
Abdelfattah, exactly.
Yeah, we'll be with him in a minute. After the break, we'll be right back.
We are the people, and this is our time. Stand up, sing out for Palestine.
Playgrounds for Palestine is a non-for-profit 501c3 organization dedicated to upholding the Palestinian child's rights to play. This is a right enshrined in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. We operate through a volunteer board and staff, the generosity of our supporters, and a lot of heart. To date, Playgrounds for Palestine has constructed 15 playgrounds in Palestine, as well as refugee camps in Lebanon and Syria. To contribute to this most worldly cause, please go to our website at www.playgroundsforpalestine.org or send a check to Playgrounds for Palestine, P.O. Box 559, Yardley, Pennsylvania 19067 at www.playgroundsforpalestine.org. Are you fascinated by the Middle East, but worried that U.S. foreign policy may lead yet to another war? Do you care about civil rights? For the past 30 years, the Washington Report on Middle East Affairs has brought its readers the real news, minus the corporate media spin. Read about Palestinians trying to survive the world's largest occupation. Learn how your hard-earned tax dollars fund that illegal occupation. Find out how much your members of Congress has received from pro-Israel PACs, and much, much more. Visit the Washington Report's website, www.wrmea.org, or call 888-881-5861 to request a free sample copy. Better yet, subscribe. It's only $29 for 9 issues. Mention Palestine today and get a bonus gift.
PDM Web Solutions is the place to go for all of your web design and online marketing needs. And we're located right by you in Riverside. At PDM Web Solutions, we build websites with an emphasis on business marketing, upgradability, and easy editing that grow with your business and won't leave you boxed in. And now we're offering an extra special. Mention the Kathleen Wells Show or Palestine Today when you come to PDM Web Solutions, and we'll give you a 10% discount. That's right, a 10% discount. Check out our website at pdmwebsolutions.com or give us a call at area code 951-543-7608. You can check out Kathleen's website to see our work, too. That's PDM Web Solutions at area code 951-543-7608. Also, like us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/PDM Web Solutions. Reliable, fast, and creative. That's PDM Web Solutions.
Hi, this is Kathleen Wells, host of Palestine Today, which airs every Saturday at 11 a.m. right here on KCAA. And guess what? My co-host, Harry Fair, and I bring you the unfiltered truth. That's right, the unfiltered truth regarding Israel and Palestine every Saturday. You will hear from Palestinians directly. You will get their perspective and point of view directly right here on Palestine Today. However, to keep the show on the air, we need you. We need you to help us make this happen. So please consider making a donation so that Palestine Today can stay on the air. Go to my website, thekathleenwellshow.com, click on the PayPal button, and all donations go directly to the production cost of keeping Palestine Today on air. No longer do you have to rely on the mainstream media spin about this region. No longer do you have to wonder, why is U.S. policy partial or slanted towards the Israel perspective? And no longer will you sit perplexed, wondering why U.S. soldiers are consistently deployed to this region. Harry and I are here to bring you the news that you will get nowhere else in the mainstream media. Palestine Today. We need you to keep the show on the air. Donate at thekathleenwellshow.com.
Donate right now at thekathleenwellshow.com. That's thekathleenwellshow.com. Donate to Palestine Today. Click on PayPal. Donate right now at thekathleenwellshow.com.
Missed something today, yesterday, last week? Check out our podcasts at www.kcaaradio.com. AM 1050 KCAA. We leave no listener behind.
So many years of catastrophe, more than 6 million refugees. It could be you and your family, forced from your home and your history.
We are the people, and this is our time. Stand up, sing out for Palestine.
Welcome back to Palestine Today. We were just listening in our first segment to a pre-recorded interview that Harry Fair conducted with Israeli Angela Godfrey-Goldstein. It was a fabulous interview, and now we're going to go to a Palestinian. I mean, this is something that you won't get on the mainstream media, an interview with an Israeli and an interview with a Palestinian. Never do you get this in the mainstream media or even in the alternative media. So now we're going to conduct our interview with Palestinian Abdelfattah Abusrour. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Abdelfattah?
It's Abdelfattah Abusrour.
That is so difficult. That's very difficult. Say it one more time for me, please.
It wasn't as bad as previous attempts at others' names. So we're improving.
Am I getting better? Well, actually, you told me what your name meant. Can you tell us again? Can you tell listeners? Abdelfattah?
My family name, Abusrour, means father of happiness. So hopefully wishing everybody a happiness ever after.
Well, it's a beautiful day for happiness. It's, in fact, quite unusual here in San Bernardino. The sky is clear. You can actually see the mountains. It's very scenic. This is unusual because usually we're swamped with smog and you can't see anything. So it's a clear day, and it's a perfect day for you to be our guest. So welcome to Palestine Today.
Thank you. I'm honored to be invited.
Abdelfattah, I wanted to start, because we don't have much time left. You'll have to come back on the show again in the near future. But I wanted to start by asking you practically the flipped question of what I asked our previous guest, Angela. And she lives in West Jerusalem. And I asked her how long it would take for her to, or how difficult it would be for her to get to visit you in Ida, which is not so far away. And I wondered, how would you be able to get to see her in West Jerusalem? Could you go through the process?
Well, I guess it might take a century, or it might take half an hour, or 3, or 10, or never.
That's very reliable.
Sorry?
I said that's very reliable, and I mean, this is one of the things that you don't know how long things are going to take, and how can you live if you don't know.
Because the issue is that for a Palestinian to go to Jerusalem, if he lives in Ida or Bethlehem or any city within the West Bank or Gaza or the outside world, would be to pass with a permit issued by Israeli occupation. And it's not accessible to anyone who has no permit by the Israelis to pass the checkpoints. So usually I cannot pass without a permit from the Israeli occupation.
Abdel, could you briefly describe the cultural center and your work for our listeners?
Ar-Rawad Cultural and Theater Center was established by me and a group of friends in 1998, and in fact in my parents' house in Aida refugee camp where I was born, with a philosophy that I call beautiful resistance against the ugliness of occupation and its violence. And the idea came after I got a scholarship to France, where I started doing my master and PhD in biological and medical engineering, in fact. But my heart was also with theater, with painting and photography. So it was a great country to develop the artistic side, but also to discover who I am. Because when I arrived in France in 1985, it was with an Israeli travel document at that time. And the Israelis give us as nationality Jordanians. So we were not considered as Palestinians, but as temporary Jordanian residents. So when I went to do my residency card, the French police gave me a residency card with nationality Jordanian refugee under Israeli mandate. So of course I wasn't very happy with that. And I said I am a Palestinian under Israeli occupation. So it was a long debate until they said, okay, monsieur, come back tomorrow. And when I came back the next day, they gave me a residency card with nationality to be determined. So I guess that was shocking in a sense, because everybody at that time was talking about Palestinians in the media, but as terrorists, not as a human being. So the idea was how to show this other image of Palestine, how to say that we are human beings, we reclaim and defend this humanity. We are under occupation, and people who are under occupation have a legitimate right to resist the occupation. Some Palestinians chose armed struggle, but almost 99% of Palestinian people never carried a gun in their life, and they resisted through a lot of other non-armed ways, education, culture, arts, etc., and existing on the land, planting the land, keeping their humanity, their culture, their identity, and so on. So that was the idea, to show this other image of Palestine, to give a space where children and young people can come to the Ar-Rawad Center, expressing themselves in the most honest, truthful, direct way. And starting with theater, because for me theater is still one of the most amazing, powerful, civilized, and nonviolent means of self-expression. It's a way to tell your story, your version of your story, without hypocrisy or trying to be politically correct. But it's also a way to build the peace within before talking about peace with anybody else. Because if you are not truthful with yourself, I don't think you can be truthful with anybody. And if you are not in peace with yourself, how can you make peace with anybody? So the idea was to give a space and a floor of expression in a refugee camp like Aida, where there is no playgrounds or green spaces anymore, surrounded by this illegal wall of separation with frequent incursions until today by the Israeli occupation army. And give this a space where we started with theater, then we added dance, photography, video to be behind the camera, not always in front of it. Express yourself, give a space where children from kindergarten, schools, parents, especially mothers, be active change makers. And I do believe that it's the women who make the change in the world. It's not the men. So it was important to empower women. And so we created the first gym for women in a refugee camp, the first football team of girls in a refugee camp. When this illegal wall was established in around the Aida camp in 2002 as barbed and later on in 2005 as these blocks of cement, we started the first outdoor film festival with a projection on this illegal wall of separation. And a lot of programs that were pioneering at that time, which is the significance of Ar-Rawad, the pioneers. And we started mobile beautiful resistance also, going all over the West Bank, trying to connect with every Palestinian city, refugee camp, village, to say that we cannot accept this Bantustanization and net segregation by the Israeli checkpoint and this illegal wall of separation. And we toured internationally as well, in France, Belgium, Austria, United States, and so on, because the idea was to show our children and young people a normal life in free countries, without checkpoints, without tear gas, without occupation soldiers, but also give opportunity for our children and young people to meet, to interact with other people, whether they are Muslim or Christian or Jewish or whatever they are. It was the possibility to look at each other as equal human beings, as potential partners, not as potential enemies.
You know what
See
you
that
said?
We have similarities.
You know, I wanted to...
should bring us closer to each other. And the differences should be something that enrich us and not marginalize us and make us afraid of each other.
You know, Abdel, you said something that I just absolutely love. You said, if you don't know yourself, how can you present or express the truth to someone else? And you also said, if you're not at peace with yourself, how can you bring peace? I think that's so, I mean, do you have a background in psychology? That's so philosophically true. I believe it too.
No, I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, but I am an artist. I am an educator, and I feel that for me, if I am not truthful with myself or not in peace with myself, then I would be angry against everybody else and would not be good to deal with at any time if there is anger and frustration. And believe me, there is a lot of things that can make you angry all the time and frustrated a lot of the time. And a lot of people come here and say, we can't do anything. It's too complicated. It's hopeless. And there I say again, we don't have this luxury of despair, because when you look at children, you can't give them a heritage of despair and hopelessness. And we cannot give them role models like the big heroes in the film, Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone or whoever, who are with guns that make more destruction than anybody else. We need better role models for our children and the generations to come, who do not disseminate death and despair, but who inspire people and give hope. And the act of resistance should be something that we can be proud of. And when our children, your children, whoever children go and protest against every injustice in the world, hopefully they will not say, we die so that lives Palestine or the world, but we live so that lives Palestine and the world. It should be this culture of life and hope, and not death and despair. And
you know, another beautiful sentiment that you touched on was this fact of identity, Palestinian identity. You said that 99% of Palestinians have not taken up arms, and yet what you get in the media is this characterization of Palestinians as terrorists. I think that's so important for people to understand. That
it is.
Yeah.
It is. I agree with you fully. And it is important that people know also that as they give themselves a legitimate right to resist the occupation and honor the heroes who resist the occupation, we also honor those who resist the occupation. And when we see in the media these zooming on few things that are happening and all the other image, the 99% erased from the map, and this continuous brainwashing and diabolization of Palestinians as terrorists, while with all the pain, sympathy, and empathy to Jews and their suffering, we were not the cause of their suffering. It's not us who made the Holocaust. And we cannot accept to pay the price for the crimes of the Nazis or Europe or whoever. Palestinians have lived together as Muslims and Christian and Jews, and they are still lived together until today as Muslims and Christian and Jews. You have one of the oldest Jewish communities in Palestine, the Samaritan community in Nablus, who speak Arabic, who have their shops in the Palestinian city of Nablus, and who have even their representation within the Palestinian parliament. So for us, this is not a religious issue. It's an occupation issue. People came here and we fought against Ottomans who were Muslims, we fought against the British who were Christians, and we fight against Israel who are Jewish. But it is not a war against religion or an ethnicity or a nationality. It's a war against an occupation.
An occupier.
And this is a legitimate right, yes.
Yeah, and you know, this is another point. You've made some very fantastic points that I want to stress to the listeners. The other fantastic point, is that your land is occupied. A lot of people will argue, or pro-Israel forces argue, that they were given the land. First of all, they have a right to the land, biblically biblically inspired and also based upon international law. The mandate by Britain gave them the land. What is your response to that?
Well, I guess this country, as I said, have hosted Muslim, Christian, Jewish, atheist, every culture in the world have passed through here. In the United States, you have Muslim, Christian, and Jews. In Syria, there is still Jewish Syrians. In Yemen, there is still Jewish Yemenite, and so on. So these people are citizens of a country. Now, if we talk about promised land, and those Palestinians who live in Palestine, Muslims and Christian and Jews, who are natives of this land, compared to a Russian Jew or a Muslim Malaysian or whatever, if we are going to religion and so on, or promises, I would say that this is a Muslim country because Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came here and went to the sky from here. I would say this land is a Christian because Jesus was born here. I would say, I don't know if it is a Jewish land because Moses was promised to come to this promised land and he never put a foot in this land. So the essence of it is that if we are talking about a religious issue, it's unsolvable. For me, this is not a religious issue. It's a citizen issue, and citizens belong to the countries they are living in. Jewish Americans are Jewish American citizens of the United States, and this land is not only the promised land, but they consider it as the permitted land for every Jew to come here. Imagine that I say, well, I am a Muslim. I can go to Saudi Arabia and say, I am a Muslim. Would they open their arms and say hi to me and welcome? Or I go to Spain and say, my Muslim ancestors have occupied Spain for 800 years, so give me my peace in Spain. So the essence of it is that citizenship is an act of being a citizen in a country. And Jews and Muslims and Christians and Buddhists and whatever have been citizens in different countries in the world, and they are citizens of these countries. Question of religion is unsolvable, and we can't reason with this issue in a way to justify all the crimes that they are committed again, in the name of God and the name of a promise that is fulfilled or not fulfilled.
Yeah, and and the way you articulate this, it makes me understand why now we don't hear Palestinian perspectives in the mainstream media. Because because you present a logical explanation, a persuasive explanation. This is why we never get your perspective. Because reasonable people would understand what you're saying.
Normally, yes, because when people believe in themselves and their values and defend these values and not to be brainwashed continuously and diabolizing others, every politician or every media try to create something, and very few stand for the values that we stand for. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about these values, when we talk about justice, freedom, peace, equality, love, these are values that we share as human beings, whether we are Muslim or Christian or Jewish or Buddhist or Hindu or atheist or whatever we are. So the essence of it is that we have no compromises to make on these values because this is the essence of our humanity. And I share as a Palestinian Muslim with my Christian Palestinian brother or even Jewish Palestinian brother much more than I share with a Muslim in Malaysia in terms of culture or Saudi Arabia even in terms of culture and identity. And this is the bottom line for me. We are citizens of a country. Now the media want to diabolize, of course, the Palestinians, or politicians need always to have an enemy. And sometimes it was the Jews, afterwards it was the Afro-Americans, the Indians, the Ethiopians, the Muslims, the Arabs. Every time we need to search enemies. And when you look on the political level, when you go even to this diabolization and you want to be a citizen and you practice your citizenship act and go to vote in elections, to whom you are going to vote? To the best or to the less worse? We are continuously pushed to be satisfied with the less worse because there is no best anymore to be elected. There is no role models who stand for the values that we defend or pretend defending, and they are the first to violate these values that they pretend defending, unfortunately. And the only response that we have against everything is war. You can see what is happening in Syria. You have seen what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and so on. And you can see how people react in catastrophes as well in their own country. What happened last year in November in a school in Connecticut, when this guy killed 20 children in the school, what happened? Everybody was crying that we should stop the open market for weapons in the United States and so on, because everybody can buy a gun more easy than he can buy a Kleenex.
Well, Abdel,
unfortunately, we've got less than 30 seconds left on air, but we'll have to have you back in the coming weeks. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your amazing insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdel. We'll have you back on. We'll have you back on. I love the show. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Israeli Angela Godfrey-Goldstein. Thank you, Palestinian Abdelfattah Abusrour. We've got 4 seconds. Thank you very much. Join us next week. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you,
You're on board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 a.m., the station that leaves no listener behind.
From the KCAA Weather Center, I'm Rod Tanner. For this afternoon, we have a red flag warning in effect for high fire danger. We'll have sunny, warm conditions with a high of 90. Overnight, it'll be clear, a low 59. Sunday continues to be sunny and warm with a high of 91. We'll have clear skies Sunday night with a low of 59. Monday should be a sunny day with a high of 87. Monday night, it'll be clear with a low of 61. Tuesday looks to be sunny with a high of 86. Again, for this afternoon, there's a red flag warning in effect. We'll have sunshine and a high near 90. That's your forecast for this hour from the station that leaves no listener behind, NBC News Radio, AM 1050 KCAA.
This is the KCAA Community Calendar. Join the next Believe Walk on Sunday, October 6th in the city of Redlands and help raise awareness and funds for local cancer-fighting organizations to ensure that the Inland Empire communities have the best cancer-fighting resources in Southern California. The Believe Walk registration opens at 6:30 a.m. and the walk begins at 8 a.m. The Believe Walk will start in downtown Redlands at State and Orange Street and finish at the Redlands Bowl. The online registration deadline is September 30th. That's the 6th annual